But these preliminary steps were essential. Like, wouldn't you agree that one of the significant steps was when Cardinal Pignedoli had the same intuition that David just referred to, that the place to start interreligious dialogue was probably among the contemplatives, meaning the monks of the different traditions. And so he asked us, the Benedictine and Cistercian abbots in this country, to start a branch of the interreligious dialogue in Europe, in America. And we had our first meeting, I think it was in Holyoke or someplace, I forget.
I forgot, yeah.
But you were there, and Raymond Panikar was there, and that man from the UN was there.
Müller,
yes,
Robert Müller.
One of the Secretary Generals. Father Basil Pennington was one of the organizers of that meeting. And Swami Satchidananda was there, and several abbots like John Hughes Bamberger, who's written so well about Evagrius, one of the shining lights of the Christian apophatic tradition. But these people got together for the first time, and one of the persons there was Juliet Hollister, the founder of the Temple of Understanding, who designed these huge conferences of all the religious leaders she could find from all over the world, and there were a number of them. And actually, it was when he went to one of them that Merton died on that trip to Asia. But there was one at the St. John the Divine in New York that was spectacular. First of all, Juliet Hollister herself, under the influence of Dean Morton, who was a fairly broad-minded Episcopal pastor of this the largest cathedral in the world, he had her robed in these priestly garments. This was before women priests were approved in the episcopate. And she went up and brought what seemed to be, some sacred object from the high altar and marched down, while that extraordinary player of the trumpet, what was his name?
Oh, yeah.
Paul Winter, was playing on this clarinet. And it just pulls your insides out. It was so glorious and perfect. So at the end of it, about 10,000 people there, and His Holiness the Dalai Lama was also there, and luminaries from all over the place, including, Helder de Câmara, the famous, supposedly communist bishop of Recife in Brazil, the founder of these Comunidades de Base in South America. Well, at the end, after this, the procession started, and this glorious music that just fills that cathedral. And people were standing on their chairs as this procession. And there were all kinds of people there, Native Americans, and all in full dress. And we walked through that cathedral. It was a moment of unity. I could never forget that. And its purpose was peace. That was the peace first among the world religions as a stepping stone to peace among nations. So the idea that religions have to get along in the modern world was projected powerfully in those events sponsored by Juliet Hollister. She had a real event.
Flair for that.
But it was a glorious event. But from that, I think it's continued to move on.
Yes, you couldn't repeat that sort of thing anymore because it wouldn't.
Well, what is your experience?
It's already happened.
Do you experience this level where the contemplative dimension is not so much among the world religions, so it's not denied, but is now looked upon as a dimension of humanity itself?
Yes.
And what does that mean in your view?
It means that people in the dialogue, or maybe I should not project this on others, it's certainly how I feel, but I think many others feel that way. It isn't of great interest whether you come out of a Christian tradition or out of a Buddhist tradition or out of whatever tradition. That just happens. What's really of interest is for us as human beings to create a world that will sustain our children. That is really a world that has a future. That is the important thing. And that's the positive aspect. The negative aspect is that many of us have discovered that if we wait for the religions as institutions to get together, we'll wait until the cows come home, because the religious institutions have a built-in interest in self-perpetuation. So they have absolutely no interest. They have an interest in talking with one another and boasting their own status by talking to the high-ups of the other institution, but it leads absolutely nowhere. And they cannot have the real. What would you expect? That they give up and they say, I mean, what would you expect? It's just a thought experiment. Nothing. But human beings of whatever tradition getting together and saying, what really makes us tick? What is really our experience of the ultimate reality? What gives meaning to our lives? And then to do this with people from very different traditions. For instance, I do it with Paul Haller, the abbot of Zen Center. I've done it for a couple of years now in Tassajara every summer, a little retreat. People can come and share it. And for the two of us, it's mostly exploring, like we are doing with one another now, exploring not Buddhism and Christianity, but human spirituality. And it's so interesting to see then, and in Buddhism, they have had this particular perspective on it. And Christians have developed that aspect. And so that is very interesting. But it's not